Okay, is the microphone on?
The microphone is on.
Cool.
Okay. If you don't know me, kind of a dumbass. So I put the flywheel and the whole clutch assembly on, and then realized ha 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 ha, I didn't have the inspection plate on. So, and then also I realized I didn't have the microphone on while I was recording. So, win-win, I guess. Took it back apart. Do it right. We all make mistakes. So, since I forgot to record audio, I guess, of doing this before, I will explain it all again. So, putting the flywheel on Fords, on these small blocks in particular, the crankshafts have an imbalance, which means they are not internally balanced, which means if you spin these up to RPM, they're going to vibrate like crazy. They are externally balanced. So the harmonic balancer at the front of the engine has a counterweight to it, and the flywheel down there at the bottom, that little chunk down there, between those two things, those balance the crankshaft. So Ford small blocks, from when they originated in 62, I think, all the way up to 82, had a 26 ounce imbalance, and then the 82 and newer 5.0 engines have a 50 ounce. So you need to make sure if you're building an engine and you have parts from different engines, that's okay, but just make sure the crankshaft has to have the correct damper, harmonic balancer, whichever you like to call it, and the correct weighted flywheel. And if you notice, the flywheel, it has a spot for a dowel pin, which, okay, that makes sense because this needs to be in a particular orientation. But the flywheel does not have a spot for a dowel pin. I will show you how that works on these Fords. So, if you notice, I should turn the screen around so I can see what you see. So, if you notice, there's no light. That hole is lined up. And, of course, there we go. There's my assistant with some. So, top hole lined up, hole next to it not. So these holes are drilled in a manner where there's only one way that all the holes will line up. So like that top one, dead center, that one, not even close. You keep spinning. Bam. Now they're all lined up. That's the only way that can fit on there. So it works. So it is in the correct orientation to balance the crankshaft correctly. I'm going to go ahead and thread lock these bolts again. I'm going to evenly tighten them down, and then I'll torque them, and then I'll come back. This is harder this time because the thread locker kind of set up so it like left makeshift threads in the flywheel. It's okay. Being dumbass is human. At least I realized the error before I put everything together and tried dropping it in the truck. That wouldn't have pissed me off at all.
We learned lots of things today, like record, turn the microphone on.
And I'm using this Loctite medium strength. These get torqued down pretty heavy, so, and these are new bolts, even though they have been installed and removed already. You know.
How much do you put on there? Do you just kind of gauge it, or?
Yeah, just a little dab, because if you put a big glob on there, you'll notice when you run it down, it'll like drip out, so you're just wasting it. Or if you put a big glob at the end, there's a chance you can hydraulic it in the hole. Star pattern, that way it's evenly brought down. And then I'm going to go ahead and torque it.
What do you torque it to?
These flywheel bolts are like 90. Hey, since I have an assistant.
What?
I said since I have an assistant.
What do you want me to do?
Hold the front crank so I can. What I always do to hold the crankshaft, I just find a couple bolts, they just happen to be long ones, but that fit into that damper, and then just put a breaker bar in between it, and that way the crankshaft can't move while you're trying to torque them down. Okay, flywheel's on, flywheel's torqued. Don't forget your inspection cover. What? And then also, another important thing, if you're putting a new engine in something, pay attention, because this engine had an automatic. So it did not have the pilot bushing in here. And what the pilot bushing is, this is a clutch alignment tool, which is identical to the front snout of that transmission over there. So when you have a manual transmission, this front snub of the input shaft actually slides in there, and it keeps the disc in the center while you disengage the clutch, because if it didn't, the clutch disc could move around because that shaft is so long. There's no way to keep it lined up. But if this were an automatic, that wouldn't be in there, and the snout of the torque converter would actually go into the crankshaft, and that would center that torque converter, and then you tighten it to the flex plate. So you got to make sure that that bushing is in there. Some cars use a little needle bearing. Some cars just use a solid bushing. You just put a little bit of grease on here. That's all you got to do with that. And then basic components of a clutch. This is your friction disc. It's got little springs in here. Basically gives a little bit of a cushion to the input shaft of the transmission so it doesn't shock it so hard. It's got a couple big springs. If you pay attention, it says flywheel side. So they make it pretty idiot proof when you're putting it together. And then if you don't know how a clutch works, it is basically just like the disc brakes of your car, but in reverse. So with a car, the rotor spins and the caliper and pads stay stationary, and the rotor goes between brake pads. When you hit the brakes, the pads squeeze the rotor and stop. This works kind of backwards to that, to where the clutch disc is like your brake pads, and it's in between two solid rotor surfaces. So this pressure plate and the flywheel are bolted together, and the clutch disc sits on the shaft of the transmission. So if you press the clutch in, that'll stop moving, but obviously the engine's still going to be running. So this and this will be spinning, but the clutch will stop. So that's kind of how that works. And then when you're assembling it all, this tool keeps everything in line, because if you try to bolt that up without this tool in there, that clutch disc can move around quite a bit while you're bolting it all up. So if this spline is out of alignment with that pilot bearing, you're never going to be able to put the transmission to it. So this little alignment tool just helps everything stay centered while you assemble everything. And so I'll explain to you how the clutch works after I put this on. But just like a brake job, before you put it all together, clean the surface. Like there's some oil, there's gunk. This is a friction surface, so if there's any oil on it, it's just not gonna, it can gum up the friction material of the clutch disc, just like you can gum up the brake shoes, brake pads. You gotta make sure you do it to both. And you do the same thing, put thread locker on it. fence it up. Makes my life a lot easier. These aren't super light.
How heavy? Like 25, 30 pounds?
The pressure plates probably. Yeah. I don't know. When you're as strong as I am, it's hard to tell. It's probably 8 pounds, but it's just awkward.
Gotcha.
You know, the flywheel is probably 16, 17, 18, something like that. It's super important with these that you don't just run one of the bolts all the way down. You go a little bit at a time, crisscross pattern. That way you kind of evenly bring it in. Because if you run one all the way down, come over here and run that one all the way down, chances are the clutch disc can shift. It's uneven when you do it like that. I mean, these bolt holes don't have a whole lot of room for it to wiggle around, but it's just so much safer and smarter to just take your time, just do a little bit, you know, move this side down a little bit, go to the next side, move it down a little bit, take your time, do it right, keep everything even. You don't want to bend the tab on the pressure plate, because I mean this is fairly thick, but it will bend pretty easy. Luckily my torque wrench is already set up to the correct.
Why?
I don't know.
Are you having a feeling of deja vu?
Yeah. But it's alright. I in no way, shape, or form pretend like I'm perfect or I do everything 100% every time, but at least I'm smart enough to realize when I mess something up and I'm not afraid to go back and fix it before I get any farther or try to band-aid it or whatever. Like, yeah, sure, the engine will run fine without this inspection cover on it, but, you know, dude lives on a gravel road. He's got gravel dust just flying up in this all day, every day. And just not the correct way of doing things.
It's not the right way. This is the way.
This isn't.
Sorry.
So the pressure plate gets torqued down to 35. Yeah, 35 is light enough to where you don't have to, if you hold it correctly, you don't have to hold the front of the crank. So I did the star pattern, and I just like going around and double checking myself. Alright, clutch assembly's in, pilot bushing still moves, you take it out, put it in. So the clutch disc is centered to that pilot bushing. So we're good on that. So like I said, this disc is sandwiched between the flywheel and the pressure plate. And if you notice these little fingers right here, these little fingers, so this is the bell housing, the clutch fork, and the throw out bearing. So when you push your clutch, it shoves down on that lever, which pushes this forward, which is when it's all bolted together in here. This bearing pushes in on these fingers, and when those fingers go in, it actually pulls that disc back just slightly, and that'll let that clutch disc free spin in the middle. And that's how, like when you pull up to a light and the truck is in gear, but the clutch is down, that's how it releases from each other. And obviously when you release the clutch, this bearing comes out, the fingers put pressure. There's like a spring, these springs are what clamp that disc in between. So, and that's why when clutches get wore out, the clutches get thinner and thinner and thinner, which means the pressure plate has to reach out farther and farther and farther to make that difference up. And that's why they start getting weak, because the spring rate of a pressure plate is with a full thickness clutch disc in there. Like I said, when it gets thinner and thinner and it has to reach farther and farther, it doesn't have the clamping force it used to. So sometimes you'll have a clutch that is slipping and you pull it out and it still has friction material on it. You're like, why is this slipping? Well, it's because, you know, it's getting thinner and thinner, and this is losing its effectiveness to clamp the clutch in the middle. So, just a little how that works. This particular, obviously, it's a brand new flywheel. It is a Zoom Performance, but it is a organic friction disc, because I don't like the way the ceramic clutches bite right away. They're too harsh, especially on like the truck I was going to use, or even this truck. It's too aggressive. It's not fun to drive. So next thing is putting the bell housing on. Alright, got basically all this engine buttoned up. Got the flywheel, clutch assembly, bell housing, got the valve covers on, gasketed, intake on, gaskets, bolts. I put the dampener on, harmonic balancer, whatever you want to call it. Got it torqued. That's all ready to go. And basically what's next is to just set the motor down, and then I need to clean the transmission up just a little bit more, and I will probably paint it. I kind of filed down the lever on this, and then re-drilled the hole in the casing, and then put a new pin in there. This thing was sloppy. I made a little video doing that, so I'll probably add that in here. This is the play in the shifter when I got it. Alright, so the old pin was very wore out, and the actual slot that pin rode in was very wore out as well. So I filed that back straight, and then I drilled this out. So that a new pin goes right in, and this is the play in the shifter now. It went from 2.5 inches of throw at the end to 1/2 inch. Pretty cool. So that's pretty much ready to go, other than I'm just gonna clean it up and I'll paint it black, and then I'll bolt it up. So hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Let me know if there's something else I'm missing, something I'm leaving out, something you want to know, whatever. You know, comment, like, subscribe, all that. You know, there's something you want to see, let me know.
I'm the assistant.
Yeah. So we're trying to do a better job, trying to get a little better quality. But I'll see you in the next one.